back. There is a word that for some makes the hairs on the back of their neck stand on end. It shocks some people and has others reaching for the first chance to change the subject and talk about something else. I'm speaking of numbers, one of the few subjects that some people run from at the first opportunity. I delayed opening this subject for a moment because there are some who think they have a psychological blind spot when they see numbers. It has very little to do with mathematics being complicated. Most people who have an aversion to mathematics have usually been told at some point in their lives that they will never understand it and that they are in some way psychologically incapable of grasping it, or they have some blind spot for numbers. It's generally done by someone like a maths teacher who should know better, and in a word, they're talking nonsense. Anyone who is capable of going to the local shops to buy something and is able to pay for those goods and check their change does not have an aversion to numbers. Real number blindness is incredibly rare. Average day-to-day mathematics is not complicated, and as I've said, anyone who tells you that it is talks nonsense. Basic mathematics is no harder to understand than simple grammar, but for some reason, best known to some of the teachers of this world, mathematics has been mystified and some sacred art only to be understood by a chosen few. And so we return to the flat earth. You don't need any complicated numbers to understand the essentials of flat earth. In fact, there is really only one calculation that's needed, and it's not a hard one. I speak, of course, to the curvature calculation. Never before has there been such controversy over one mathematical argument. The calculation for the curvature on a globe really is a simple one. That if the Earth were a globe with a circumference of 25,000 miles and you stood anywhere on that globe, the drop below your eye level can be calculated by squaring the number of miles to an object and multiplying the answer by 8 inches. It will give you the drop in inches, and if you divide the inches by 12, it will give the answer in feet. It really is that simple. For some reason, people are not satisfied that the matter is that straightforward, and variously try to use trigonometry, which is generally used for working with small, precise numbers and only serves to complicate answers that then need to be rounded out. It's totally unnecessary for the purposes of calculating the drop on a globe. Others, for some reason, hark back to the fact that Samuel Rowbotham used the calculation when he published his book, Earth Not a Globe, in the middle of the 19th century, and as if to say it was a long time ago, so it can't be correct. So let's dispel a few myths. First and foremost, the truth doesn't have a shelf life. The calculations for curvature haven't changed over time, although various scientists have sought to muddy the waters by variously claiming that the Earth is not a sphere, but an oblate hemorrhoid or some other pear shape. I'll address those matters later. Others have occasionally sought to discredit Rowbotham in an attempt to discredit the calculation, as if to say he was a Freemason, so his maths must be wrong. So for the record, let's clear the matter up. In the late 19th century, Samuel Rowbotham used the familiar calculation as it was provided to him by the Encyclopaedia Britannica. It has been variously restated by subsequent authors right up until the 1960s, when the flat Earth seemed to drop from the radar for a while after the space adventures of the time. The Encyclopaedia Britannica quoted the calculation in an item called levelling, that by squaring the number of miles and multiplying the result by 8 inches, you'll get the drop below eye level. The same calculation is cited by countless other reputable publications of the time too. There has been something of a recent contender in this particular argument, where some have suggested that the fall in distance should actually be even more pronounced. Unfortunately, this recent addition seems to miss a rather glaring error. Anyone attempting to explain globular arguments should not miss the fact that if you are standing on a 25,000-mile globe, at any point you will always stand at a right angle to the surface of the globe, for that is what gravity dictates. And as such, all calculations can rightly imagine that you're at the top of the globe and can be made accordingly. There have been one or two who've attempted to rewrite the calculation for the curvature of a globe, and seem to succeed in doing nothing more than throwing a jumble of mathematical formulas into the mix that serve only to confuse and deter others from looking further. It's worth pointing out that in many cases, the proponents of complicated numbers don't seem to understand the calculations themselves. Rather, they seem to parrot what somebody is given to them and speak as if they're some great authority. The reason I cast doubt on what these apparent great minds have to say is simple. Most of them don't seem to know the first meanings of the terms they use. When someone expresses something as tan to the -1, which is just a mathematical term, it's nothing more than a parroted reading of something they've seen written in a book. Anyone who truly understands those formulas would, in the first instance, speak of them in plain language. So I'll end here where I came in, by stating that the mathematics and numbers needed to follow flat Earth really is not a complicated subject, except for those who choose to complicate it for the purposes of showing others how clever they think they are. In short, anyone wishing to explain something to someone else should do so in terms that are clearly understood. If you choose to explain something in a way that can't be understood, I ask you, who's the fool? I really don't think there needs to be any doubt as to the calculations of curvature for a 25,000-mile globe. The calculation works. It is as practically accurate as it needs to be. No amount of YouTube amateur mathematicians, with or without their rulers and compasses, can alter that fact, and we might be wise to accept the calculation as read and move on to more important things. Thank you for listening.